Hello everybody, this is Henri from AXBlue support team. Welcome to the second part of our hands-on video on how to interface and integrate an OM INS in a vehicle. In this second video, I will show you about the configuration in a lab or workshop environment. It will consist of 4 simple steps. Wire the kit together, connect the kit through power supply and computer Ethernet, configure your computer to work on the same IP range with the unit, at last the WebMMI configuration. It will allow us to configure the unit before we integrate it on our subsea vehicle in the next part of this hands-on video. To interface the kit together, we'll have to work with the IMU subassembly and the electronic subassembly and those cables in the scope of delivery and to assemble them together. For that purpose, in the user documentation, we give you this schematic that will tell you exactly which to connect to what. What I'd like to do is to start always from the electronic subassembly to wire to the IMU subassembly, and I will take the connectors one by one. I cannot confuse all the cables together because they're all different and they only have one way to connect. Let's review a little bit the schematic before I plug together all those cables. So I will start with this one, that's J10, that will connect here to J14. Then I will use this one, J4, that will connect here to J2. The last one will be here, J3, that will connect here to J1. Before I proceed, I have to remember to wear my ESD bracelet. I'm still in an ESD protected environment. So now I proceed by connecting this one. So those connectors, those black connectors, they have two little lock of the connector. As soon as I plug it, I should feel a small click and make sure once plugged to secure those two tiny connectors, and I can pull a little bit the cable to make sure it's properly secured. The second cable is here. I will use this 4-pin connector. I will plug it here. So those white connectors, you will feel a little click as you fit them. And here, it will fit here. Here it's always sometimes confusing because we have 2 connectors of the same. Actually, we recommend to wire this one, but both of them are the same. Here it is, my small click. And the last cable, it's a 3-pin here and a 3-pin there. So it can work one way or the other. Here it is, my kit is assembled together. Now I will power it and connect it to my computer. For that purpose, I will use the scope of delivery power cable, but you can also make your own cable if you like. Here I will use a power supply of my own. I encourage you to use a lab power supply so you can also check power consumption. And here I have a 220 power socket. At last, I will connect the Ethernet cable RG45, and you can see here I can connect this and to my computer. So now that it is all plugged together, I can connect to my computer and set up the network parameters. Why should I do that? Because actually, by default, at the time of the factory, the unit would have a predefined IP address. The predefined IP address of the unit would be actually according to its serial number. Here, the serial number is QA-0654. So by default, the IP address of that unit would be 192.168.36.154. I just have to choose a different IP address for my computer. For that purpose, I went to network parameters of my computer. It's in French here, but you access this menu through network settings, Ethernet properties, and then IPv4 properties. Here, I always like to choose the 100 IP range, which makes it simple to remember. Now that I configured my computer properly, I just have to connect to the WebMMI of the INS. For that purpose, I will go to a browser of my choice. Usually, I like to choose the Mozilla Firefox and type the IP address of the unit. And here it is, the WebMMI will preload. So now that I am in this MMI configuration menu, I will browse all the menus one by one, and there is few important parameters I think for you to look at and that we should configure before deployment in our vehicle, integration in our vehicle. So the first menu would be the mechanical installation. We'll see later on when we install the unit in our mock-up AUV that this will be done very visually on how to install the unit. That's also in this menu that I can set up finer angles for misalignments and output lever arms. The next menu will be about inputs. Like I said in the previous part of this video, here I have a lot of different sensors that I can configure to my unit. So I could configure up to 7 input over Ethernet, 5 of them over serial or Ethernet, and I have here about 13 sensors. So you can see that we have 2 possible GNSS, 2 possible DVLs. So when we choose in our design to have 2 of the sensors feeding the INS, we could actually interface 2, and then the INS will choose which one is more accurate, and you'll use it for navigation. For the purpose of this show, I will interface very briefly a USBL sensor, since we'll work on an AUV. So I choose to use the USBL LBL CTD protocol over Ethernet that I send with a simulator unit on the port 8111. I could configure the lever arm here, and it's very important when you use USBL configuration to always declare a TP code. So here I'll use 017, for example. So now that I applied the setting, I can check in my sensor control panel, which is the kind of small hyper terminal feature that I receive my simulated USBL data. It's very useful, and that's also what makes, I think, this very standalone OEM integration experience. Everything is inside the unit, so it makes it much more simple for you to consider an integration in a vehicle. I will also configure outputs, so I have up to 5 outputs of different industry standard protocols. Usually you could use AXBlue standard bin, for example, which is an industry standard protocol, binary format that sends everything to your vehicle. And usually your vehicle will be able to decode that telegram and use it for navigation purpose. This protocol is very nice because in addition to giving you the output data, it will also resend the input data. For example, right now, because I configured an output, it's also sending this fake USBL I receive as an input. I can here configure the network settings. So if I'd like to change the IP address of my unit, for example, if I integrate a fleet of vehicles, I want maybe have to have an IP address rule of my desire. That's where I could change those information. Here in the setup menus, it's more like configuration about operational, different configuration modes that you will use operationally. Here I will leave it by default, which is the configuration we advise. Should you do the case 2D2 that we spoke about in the previous scenario, you could, for example, control command those values to be changed depending your vehicle deployment scenarios. What I really like to show you here is something about settings management. So here, as soon as I configured one unit, I can save the settings. It comes in a configuration file, which is in text format. And it's really nice because then I can apply the same configuration to a fleet of vehicles, for example. If I manufacture a lot of vehicles, I just have to maintain one configuration file and apply it to every unit that I will integrate in my vehicles. A second cool feature that I like with this web interface is the ability of having a data log. So for example, I can record data internally on this board. You don't see it really well here, but there's actually an SD card for data recording in this board. It's very nice because usually in a vehicle integration, you have your own data recording means, but it provides you with like a fail-safe or backup solution for data recording. It's all inside the unit. So thanks for watching this show. Before I go to the next part, which is about integration in our mock-up AUV vehicle, I'd like to remind you about the cool things we've seen through this portion. You see, everything is very easy and visual to configure through the web interface. So it makes your OEM integration experience much more easier, and you can use what we said before, this standalone integration feature. We've seen it can interface to a lot of external sensors out there on the field and in the industries. This makes this product very versatile for different kind of integrations. You've seen it's quite fast to configure, even though I left some of the settings by default. You can, like in 10-20 minutes, configure the full setup and deploy it in by saving and recording the configuration file, deploy it in many vehicles. At last, the small features to make it simple, for example, the data logging or the setting file save, but we'll see also in the next series of videos other features to make it very fast forward and straightforward for vehicle integration. Thanks for watching this show and see you in the next session.